Good day, everyone. Our topic for today is analyzing and evaluating the argument, and I'm your teacher for today, Miss ANGELIQUE TAGUBA. If you want to know the references that I used for this video, you can check the description box below. Before we discuss our topic for today, let's have first some review. Let's have modified true or false. All you have to do is to write true if the statement is correct. If not, correct the sentence by rewriting it and changing the word or words that make or makes the sentence wrong. Write your answers on a piece of paper and submit it in our Google Classroom in the folder Analyzing the Argument Outputs. Are you ready? Let us begin. Here is the first sentence. An argument is supported by pieces of evidence which are based on the opinions of others. True or false? Here is the second statement. An argument can also be the ideas that support the thesis statement in an academic text. True or false? Here is the third sentence. Refutation refers to the pros and cons of an argument. Here is the fourth statement. It is very natural for individuals to question a certain claim. True or false? Last but not the least, an argument begins with a general assumption and develops to a specific truth. True or false? Because we're already done with our review, let us go to our topic, which is analyzing and evaluating the argument. Last time, we studied about argument, and we learned that in academic writing, an argument is usually a main idea, often called a claim or thesis statement. We also learned that an argument is a claim that is supported by reasons or pieces of evidence. And we learned that an argument should take a stance about a particular point of view, thesis, or claim. In this video, you're going to learn the difference between analyzing an argument and evaluating an argument. Before you can evaluate an argument, you need to analyze it. When you analyze an argument, you break it down into its parts and examine them by themselves and in relation to the other parts of the argument. In order to do that, you need to follow the 4 steps in analyzing an argument. The first step in analyzing an argument is to identify the argument's claim. In order to do that, you need to know the point of the argument. What is the conclusion the author is trying to persuade the reader to accept as true? The next step is to identify the reason or evidence. What you need to do here is to examine all of the pieces of evidence presented so that you will know if the claim is properly supported by the pieces of evidence. The third step is to think critically and skeptically about the evidence. Always ask yourself the following. First, what is the source of the evidence? Second, is the evidence true? Third, do the reasons or evidence defeat or weaken the argument? And last, ask yourself how the pieces of evidence support the claim. Always remember that if the evidence is weak or false, then the argument will be less persuasive or even invalid. Also, if the evidence is poor, the argument will be less persuasive or even invalid as well. Because we're already done With analyzing an argument, let us go to evaluating an argument. Always remember that when you evaluate an argument, you determine its value or persuasiveness. To be able to do a good job evaluating arguments, you need to know what an argument is and how an argument is put together. In order to fully evaluate an argument, one must read it critically. Always remember that an argument is a claim that is supported by reasons or evidence. When an author tries to persuade the reader that something is true or correct by presenting supporting reasons or evidence, an argument is being made. Also, an argument is different from a statement. And an argument presents logical reasons and evidence to support a viewpoint. This is the reason why you don't need to just read it. You have to understand it while reading it. You have to understand how an argument is put together. To help you evaluate different arguments, there are strategies that will help you in doing it. The first strategy is to evaluate the types of evidence. It is very important for you to know if the type of evidence is valid or not. We all know that a writer would give different types of evidence in order to persuade the reader. You always need to ask yourself if the pieces of evidence presented are sufficient enough to support the claim. You also need to check if the sources are credible. Number 2, personal experience. We all know that a personal experience could convince or persuade numerous people. But always remember that a personal experience could be biased. A personal experience could work for a person, but it could not work for another. So do not accept it. There is also a possibility that a personal experience is just made up. Number 3, example. We all know that examples are very important in order for us to have a full grasp of an argument. But we should remember that examples should not be used by themselves. Examples must be based on facts. Examples must have facts. Number 4, statistics. We all know that statistics are used to validate a study or a result of a study. But we should remember that because statistics are numbers that represent a whole population, it can be misused, manipulated, or misinterpreted. Number 5, comparison and analogies. We all know that comparison and analogies are often used in order to show the logic behind an argument. But always remember that comparison and analogies must be reliable and they must correspond to the situation or to the claim. Always remember that reliability depends on how closely they correspond to the situation. Number 6, relevancy and sufficiency of evidence. Sometimes a writer can provide pieces of evidence just for the sake of providing something. That is the reason why it is very important for us to evaluate if the pieces of evidence presented are relevant and sufficient in order to support the claim. Number 7, definition of terms. We all know that a single term could have multiple meanings. This is the reason why it is important for a writer to put parameters on the definition of a certain term in an argument. When evaluating an argument, be sure to carefully check if the term is carefully defined and used consistently all throughout the argument. Number 8, cause and effect relationships. Cause and effect relationships are very effective in proving an argument. It gives us a vision of what is going to happen if we choose something over another. This is the reason that we have to look for the relationship that exists between the cause and effect presented. Number 9, Implied or stated value system. In checking a statement with an implied or stated value system, all you need to do is to check if the value system presented is consistent with your personal value system. Number 10, recognizing and refuting opposing viewpoints. In order to recognize and refute opposing viewpoints in an argument, you need to question the accuracy, relevancy, or sufficiency of the opponent's evidence. Also, ask yourself if the author addressed opposing viewpoints clearly and fairly. You may also ask yourself if the author refuted the opposing viewpoint with logic and relevant evidence. Number 11, unfair emotional appeals. These are emotionally charged or biased language. They are used in order to touch the emotion of the reader in order for him or her to accept a certain argument. This can be through various strategies. Letter A, false authority. One example is an athlete endorsing underwear. We all know that an athlete should endorse sports and not underwear. When evaluating an argument, always check the relationship of the authority being used to the argument. Letter B, association. An example is a car being named a cougar to remind you of a slick animal, or a cigarette advertisement featuring a scenic waterfall. Association is used by comparing or associating a certain thing to another. When evaluating an argument with association, always check if the association is valid or not. If the two things being associated are relevant to each other or not. Letter C, appeal to common folk. Appeal to common folk is done by means of giving an argument that will convince or persuade the ordinary people or the masses, also known as the common folks. An example is an ad showing a product being used in an average household. Also, a politician suggesting he is like everyone else. When checking or evaluating an argument that is based on an appeal to common folk, be sure to check the relationship of the argument to common folks or to common people. Letter D, ad hominem. Ad hominem is an attack on the person rather than his or her viewpoint. When evaluating an argument that is based on ad hominem, be sure to check if the argument is based on facts or a personal attack on the opponent. An argument will only be valid if it is factual. So that's our lesson for today. Before we end, you need to answer this. All you have to do is to first read and understand the text. Next, write a short analysis of the text argument using the ways of evaluating and analyzing the text. And last, write your answer on a sheet of paper. Pass it through Google Classroom in the folder Analyzing Arguments Output. Here is the text. The Philippines cannot support online schooling for most of its students, and the attempt will prove ineffective for majority of the country. Online learning requires proper equipment such as a smartphone that can support calls or video, and a stable internet connection. Only a fraction of public schools, however, have access to the internet, so they will not be able to meet the requirement of a stable connection. According to DepEd's ICT Service Director Ida Yuvienco, in a recent interview with GovInsider, only 26% of public schools are connected to the internet or are able to connect to the internet. And she added that nearly 5,000 public schools in remote areas do not even have access to electricity. Obviously, the Philippines is far from being technologically advanced, being 83rd out of 138 countries in terms of digital readiness, according to the Department of Science and Technology. Also, due to poverty in the Philippines, not all families have the resources to get the required equipment for online learning. These families simply cannot adjust to the requirements for online schooling and will otherwise be left behind or forced to find other methods of schooling for their children. The Philippines is far too unprepared for the sudden proposal of online learning. That is adapted from this link that you could see. Okay, so you need to pass that and you need to answer that. That's our lesson for today. Again, check the description box below in order to see the references that I used in this video. Have a nice day, everyone.